Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
So yeah, no, you can go ahead. I'm not talking. You're the one.
No, no,
You
you-
gotta be close to the thing.
Okay,
So
okay.
yeah. Hello. So yeah, you can go ahead and okay. I'm with Yuri here, and yes, we try to keep the distances, but the idea there is GraphQL is so awesome, and yeah, we took care of the security part, so everything is okay. But thank you everyone for joining. If you can't, we just want to do a quick check to know if you can hear us.
Yeah.
Just a quick sound check.
Mhm.
Um,
Can you write in the chat or something that
Yeah.
you can hear us?
Yeah, there is a little bit of
Yeah,
delay,
yeah, yeah.
so we should be we should take a few seconds. But once we have a sound check, we can go. So let us know down there. Yeah, today what are you going to talk about?
Okay,
Here.
so first of all, thanks for having me.
Yeah, once again.
Yes,
it's nice to have you
It's
here.
always a pleasure. I
Yes.
hope we'll see at the end of this if it was still a pleasure or not. Yeah, and today I'm going to talk about and demonstrate, like actually live, about GraphQL Mesh,
Yeah.
which is a library that we released a couple of months ago. And I think because the library can do so much, I think there's a lot of like people are confused. When do I use it? What do I use it for? And there's actually many different use cases where this library fits in. So today I'm gonna demonstrate a number of those use cases.
Yeah.
So like actually like we're gonna start with a very simple like a very simple Apollo server, like how everyone is used to, write Apollo servers today with data sources and everything. And from that point, I'm going to show in your existing code, if you're using Apollo server, how can you start integrating Mesh today, and why would you do that?
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, I'm keeping like expanding and doing more and more of. I hope to have time to show more and more of what Mesh is capable of. So at the end, we'll actually end up with basically the same code running with no code. So you just have
So
a configuration file and
same
everything.
code with no code.
Yes,
that's fantastic. Yeah.
all the app that we had and we built, now how we can slowly move into just doing everything on like a just configuration file, a YAML file.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's okay. We hear you.
Oh,
it's
good.
a bit low. The volume is a bit low. I can
Okay.
hear you, but that's okay.
Yeah, I
that
can
we
put this here or something, or
Yeah,
maybe like.
this is pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, but then I can't see the laptop.
No, just keep it how it was, and
Okay.
then I think we should be good. Yes, we hear you. Yeah, it's okay. We have a. Okay, let's get started then.
Okay. So yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. Like I'm happy you're right next to me. So like all the mistakes that I'll make, like you'll help me to fix those.
So maybe you also want to like for the people that don't know who you are. It's important that they also understand that you're a magician behind the guild. And myself, I'm Davey, and I work at Hackages. You see Hackages here. You see that? That's the company.
Yeah.
And
here.
welcome to see you. Welcome here, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because we're gonna bring more badass people like him and some awesome content. So you work for the guild, or you're the founder at the guild, and you guys are.
Yeah, so maybe I'll even go to the website, because now we have a website finally. I'm the founder or a member in a group called the Guild, and what we do is we build sustainable open source. We're very much focused on GraphQL. So I worked for a number of years in Apollo, and then we broke out and started the guild because I saw that there's some stuff that are lacking in the community, and we thought maybe there's a better way to build open source libraries that are actually very well maintained and are there for the long term. So that's who we are. Like, you can finally, we have a website, so you can actually come in and see all the stuff we do. And you know, it started very small, but now I think if you're using GraphQL, you're probably using a lot of our tools. So GraphQL code generator is a very famous one. GraphQL modules is a very famous one. GraphQL Mesh that I'll talk about today. We recently took over GraphQL tools, which is one of the most popular libraries in the community, and was kind of like, wasn't maintained for almost 2 years. So we took over it, and basically closed most of the issues, released 2 major versions, and now it's with ongoing support. A lot of people use that library for example, schema stitching. So we kind of like rebuild schema stitching to make it much faster and much better. And we use it in Mesh, so I'll show that as well. Inspector, and you can see here a lot, like configs, Sofa, and GraphQL code generator is one of the most famous ones, and of course the GraphQL CLI. So we do a lot of open source. Every library that is in here, we use it daily with our clients in production. And every library that it is here, we're looking daily at the issues and the PRs, and we're daily maintaining them. And that's happening like that for years. So, and this is something I think that was a bit lacking in the community. And we just proved that you can do that for years in consistency. And again, this is not me. We're a group with very smart people there. And that's also why all the reasons, like if you go to the GitHub of those libraries, it's all under a person's name. So in this case, it's under my name, but if we go to inspector, let's say, it's under Camille's name, because we believe that, let me find it here. It's kind of a philosophy thing. Like, because if Camille or us does a bad job in maintaining it, anyone can just fork it. It's much easier to fork from a person than from an organization. We had,
so for some people, if you're interested to know more, I had you on the podcast, and we discussed that in length, and you can go ahead there and watch it on Hackflix. So that's it. So without further ado, let's do some GraphQL Mesh.
So let's start. So GraphQL Mesh. This is if you want to like look at the docs and start somewhere, you can look here at the website graphqlmesh.com. And I got a tweet where when I basically in a thread describe everything it does. Like, it does basically 2 major things. One is it takes any source, even one that is not GraphQL, for example, OpenAPI or gRPC, SOAP, and automatically converts that source into a GraphQL schema, an executable GraphQL schema that you can start querying. So we'll see that in a second, just by configurations. And the second thing it does is that then it goes in and it merges those. So basically, we can take, let's say, a number of different sources. Like, let's say we have a provider that is gRPC and another API that is OpenAPI. We can convert them both into GraphQL, but then also merge them into one single graph. So, you can create like a graph of data of all your all your sources.
Just be closer than this,
so you can take basically like create a global graph of your whole data, but you don't have to have any assumptions on the services you're consuming. You don't need them to be GraphQL, and you don't need them to be like federated GraphQL. They're just like, whatever they were. And in most companies, it's a big benefit, because most of in large companies, usually, people don't have time to convert all the services to GraphQL or to another new protocol. So they have their Java servers written in Spring with kind of like REST APIs and maybe with Swagger, but maybe not even. And the Swagger is probably outdated. So, so we can give this powerful ability on any, in any enterprise company or any existing company. And I also show here why it's so powerful, even just as a, if you just have a small startup, and why is it even more powerful than like regular REST data sources and things like that. Okay, so let's just start. So let's look at what we have here. I have here an example application, and this is like kind of like your typical Apollo server application. So, and what it does, like let's look at the graphical for a second. So it's basically, I can, I have here docs, like I can get cities and I can get breweries, right? Like that's a simple API, and I can go in and I can fetch, from, like from a city, I can go in and select the region or whatever, send a request and get it back. So how do we do that, today in Apollo server? Again, this is like, I'm not discovering anything new here. We basically have a data source for, a data source for each REST endpoint that we call in. The data source that sources that we chose, I'll just show you their websites and like where we're actually coming from. So one is that public GeoCities API. It's just a public API, and the good thing about that API is that it has a schema. So it has a Swagger schema, so we can take that Swagger schema, and it can help us, right? We can go in and look at what's possible and what not, and it's not like we're only dependent on the documentation that might be outdated. So that's a good example. Like most APIs that we work with don't have that. And another example, like the other API that we call in, is the breweries API. We want to get basically the breweries by, I don't know, by city, for example, or breweries by that. So there's like an open API for that. And they have docs and stuff like that, and that's cool, but they don't have schemas. So, and that's usually what we're facing when we're working with GraphQL. We have REST data sources, we don't have schemas, and we need to kind of like figure things out.
Yeah.
So with GraphQL, after we've done the work, we get this thing. So it's much easier for people, we get the documentation, we get everything, but when we actually go to the resolvers, we don't have that. Yeah. We're still in the same place. So let's go back here and look at it and how we implemented it now, and that's kind of like the standard way of how people start GraphQL, they start Apollo, and how they do it. So first thing, in Apollo we have this thing.
We'll zoom a little bit for the size.
Here?
Just,
yeah.
Like plus, yeah.
Yeah, give it a second.
Yes.
That's better?
Yeah. Much better,
okay.
Yeah.
So here what we can see is that Apollo has this thing called REST data sources, and also REST data source that gives you all kinds of cool abilities, and mostly a simple API to interact with REST data source. So, we basically declare the base URL here. This is for the breweries. And then, how can we find breweries? We just do a get, and, this is just something that we looked at the documentation, we created. The same thing we did for the GeoDB, right? We just declare this and did a get with the arguments, which is in this case is the name. And we get the new cities. Now, what we need to write then manually is that, we need to write, first of all, the schemas for those. So here, again, I already created it manually because I didn't want to waste time, but, I created a root query called find cities, and then I described the response, how the response looks.
Yeah.
And this is just, where today everyone is doing it manually. And that's okay because you can also do the adjustments that you need and everything. And as you saw, it works. And then I created a resolver here, which, I get the find cities query, and I can just, maybe I'll just do it like this so it will be like easier to read. But basically, that's what we're doing, right? Like we're just like we just call the data source and find cities. We get that response, and then GraphQL, according to this, all of those, does the work of like choosing what fields I want and bringing it back to me. So the same, again, the same things happening here, and that's it. Now, what you saw here, by the way, something that I want to point out, if we go to the where it all fits in together, then what you see is that we're separating those two into, let's say it's two different teams. So we want to separate the code, we want to separate the schemas. Then there were a lot of different tools in the community. It was a bit of a mess. People sometimes think they need to like create a federation module for each of those just to have like a nice separation. Yeah. The truth is that you don't need that. Like you can just, everything is here. So we can just merge them at build time and get a ready-made executable schema that is much more performant than schema stitching or federation, because it's just a plain GraphQL server how it's supposed to be. So what we've done is that, as I said, we took over GraphQL tools and we merged a lot of the community packages that we had before into one package, in this case GraphQL tools, and it has the merge capability. So it can merge type defs and resolvers. So here we just, we bring on the DB types and the GeoDB types and the brewery types. We bring on the resolvers, we merge them, we add the data sources, and we get a server. Now, it doesn't matter how many more teams we have, and if we're a big corporation or whatever, it's still, at the end of the day, you get to work separately, but you can still you don't need to add the overhead of schema stitching or or federation. So it's a point that I think people should know in the community, that you don't have to have those complicated solutions. They're very powerful, but this is how, by the way, Facebook does GraphQL. Facebook doesn't do federation or schema stitching. They just compile everything at build time and have one big server. So this is just to show you that. So anyway, this is a regular server, and that's great. Now, the thing is, few things here. When I go here to data source, so a lot of people, when they talk about GraphQL, they say it gives you type safety over the network. So that means, it's because of this thing. Like, it's because that here I know, everything I get, and I have this auto-generated docs, and I can just go in and do that. And for that, there's GraphQL code generator that it can look at that and generate the TypeScript types for you. Now that's cool, but that's between the client and the server. When we go to the resolvers, and we have here this.getCities, we have no idea what are the types that we're going to get here, right? This is any.
Yeah, because you're getting it from this API that you just actually don't have control over.
Exactly. So let's say we were using here GraphQL code generator. What we would have is basically GraphQL code generator. What would be very powerful? It will add types here. All those inputs into the resolver would be type. Okay. Then it will also add a type here of like the response, like what we're gonna get.
Actually, there's someone who was asking like. We are not using the argument though. It's like, but in
true.
This case,
you mean this one?
Yeah, the args is used, but like the root and the info, but that's the point. You don't have to use all of them.
True. It's just, I'm putting it all here just to show like the whole context, but but it's true. Like, but we actually here we use the args because we need to get the cities.
And we need the context as well. So
exactly, and I'll show like how it all fits in a second. But so if we had GraphQL code generator, it was really cool because we get here all those things typed, and we would get the response types as well. Yeah. But what about this thing? So we know the type that we're going to want to return here. We know the inputs, but here we're going a third-party API. We have no idea. We're guessing here. So we need to go to the docs. We need to go to, this website or did I open or this website, figuring it out, maybe send a request, get a mistake, fix it. Like we're basically in the same place. So what can we do about it? So so that's why kind of like that's where we started when we were looking at Mesh. Just about this thing, we said, how can we type this part? Because we know some of that information, right? We know some of it has schemas, so GeoDB API has a schema. And also maybe, you know, we have in the Open Brewery case, we know in our head what we're gonna get, or maybe we have like logs of the API, of the that live responses we're already getting. Can we take all those things and generate a schema from it and type the whole system? So that's where we actually started using Mesh, not as like a whole gateway, which we'll get to that as well, but also just as a better data source for your applications.
A cleaner
so
source,
maybe let's start with that. Yeah, like maybe let's start with like taking the like using Mesh to basically replace just the code here. Like just replace the cities and all those things. So first of all, maybe we should like install Mesh. Yeah. You know what? Let me do something before. So right now we have two sources, and they're just two sources. Like, you know, I can get the cities, and I can get the
the breweries.
I can get the breweries.
Yeah.
But I can't get. What I really want is like the breweries in a city, right?
But you want to merge them in your code directly, but you already have that on your the way it's you set up the server, the Apollo server. But
yeah, but still not. Like today, I have we can go to here to cities and we can find breweries.
Okay.
But under cities, what I really want is I want to do give me breweries, which I don't have right now.
Okay. Okay.
So let's just start with that. Yeah, and that's like a simple GraphQL thing, but still, just so we can like, just so we can have the graph as we want it to be. So first of all, let's look here. So we have the geotypes and we have the brewery types. But what we really want, we want to have like a new kind of type. We want to extend the existing types. Now, again, some people say, okay, use Schema Stitching. But again, I have everything here.
Yeah.
So why would I need to do that? So let's just like, let's add the string that we would want to add to our schema. So let's call it link type defs, and this will just be a string. Now let's see. So we basically, what we want is to extend the type city. Yeah. And what we want to extend it with is breweries.
Yeah.
I hope I'm writing breweries right. Like that's always, and that's from the type brewery that we already have. Like just if I want to like make sure that I'm doing it right, I can go here to the type defs and get the type brewery. I just want to add that field onto here.
Yeah.
Now, by the way, just to tell the tools, I'm gonna like say to my IDE that will understand that this is GraphQL with this magic comment. Okay, so now in order to extend this type def, all I need to do is actually just take this and add it here.
Yeah.
Done. Now the schema is a full schema. But what's missing is, okay, let's say someone queries now for the breweries under city.
We need a resolver for
We need a resolver for
that.
So let's just add it. Again, no schema stitching, no magic thing. Let's call it like link resolvers. It will be from iResolver, just to make sure that we're doing it right. And what we want is we want to basically have the city
within the
repository, and the city has breweries.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll take this. This is breweries, and breweries. It will be a resolver. So let's just do like root. What do we have there? Args.
Context and
Context. Info. And then the function will just be like, let's do it like this nicely. Context. So we have this information already. Like we have the data sources, and we have the, the existing Open Brewery API, and it has a function called find. Let's go to the data source, just to make sure that I'm not making mistakes. You always want to copy paste things instead of actually writing them manually. Let's just make sure that I also wrote it nice. And then, I want to find breweries, and then by city I want.
Okay.
And I'm gonna take the name that I got. So now I have the resolvers that I want. And again, it's all here. Like I'm doing it here actually in the index. Probably you would want to put it in a folder or something just to show that this is just GraphQL. There's no any magic going on here.
You didn't install another library or anything like that. You're just leveraging the existing power of GraphQL.
Exactly. Because sometimes people are just jumping into like all those new technologies too fast. So what I theoretically I can do now, I'll refresh. Sorry that I didn't set up like live refresh, but you can. So I can have breweries here, and let's say, what do I have on breweries? Like the name of the brewery and the street is in. What did I did wrong? Let's see. That's resolvers. Info.
Returning. We need to
find brewery API. Find breweries.
But we need to return from the brewery. Like that function doesn't return anything, does it?
Oh right.
Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think we're gonna have the same issue down there because we had when we
Here? No, here I didn't. I didn't change anything. I just extracted here.
Okay.
But good one. Thank God.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Thank God you're here. Okay. Let's go back here. Refresh. And let's call it. What am I doing wrong?
If you go back in the code, I think we had the same issue. We at some point, if you scroll a bit down below, we split that and then we return one of the resolver. One of the resolver wasn't returning anymore. Oh, okay.
This one is returning.
Yeah. Okay, if you go on resolver here, where are we using it?
Wait, let's do like this.
Yeah.
Just so I make sure that.
Yeah. We had the Open Brewery API.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that's true.
Typo, yes.
Okay. Now, hopefully this should work. You see, even in the simple stuff, it's hard.
Yeah.
But thank God you're here. Okay. So now, let's go back here. And let's try it now. All right. What am I doing wrong? Wait, if I'll do just like this, it's find cities that it doesn't work. Why is that?
Yeah.
Even the regular one that worked before.
If you go on the resolver, because we changed something on resolver.
Oh, you're right.
We did change here. We don't return anything.
Oh, you're right.
That's the one. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you told me that.
Yeah. That should fix it.
Yes. Makes sense.
Yeah, indeed. That's That's our die is basically pointing that out. Yeah, indeed, it's the one.
Yeah. Right, loads. My computer is like dying here. Okay, so now
So
the regular
should
thing
have
is
it.
go, but I also have the breweries, and I can query the name and I don't know, like, yeah, street, whatever. Yeah,
Now we get
now we have it. So that's like a real graph that we actually want. That's like the whole power of GraphQL, but in the standard way that everyone is doing it. Now, what we actually want to do is to start replacing those things with something that maybe is more automated, and let's start and just gives us the types here, right? Like it will just, by the way, if we had Cogen here, it will tell me you're not returning anything, and I would just,
You see it right
so
away.
Cogen is like Davy next to you. It's like,
Cogen is like Devi next to you.
yeah.
Okay.
So almost as good. Oh, it's not as good as Davy, but almost as good.
I take that.
Yeah. Okay, so Mesh. So how do we start with Mesh? So first of all, let's install the library. Yeah. So first thing that we want to install is Mesh CLI, which is the tool that will help us that. Mesh runtime, which is actually the runtime that would do the calls and do all the operations. And then we have two sources here. So we have two sources here. One is like an OpenAPI one, OpenAPI, that will take the schema of the GeoAPI and will convert it automatically to GraphQL and generate all the types with types for it. So that's, yeah, I'll show you. It sounds a lot, but I'll just show you that in a second.
It is nuts.
And then the second thing, yeah, and I hope people will get excited now. But then the second thing is the breweries API. It's an API that we have the examples and stuff, but we don't really know what's coming out. We don't have a schema. So what we'll do there is very interesting, is that we're going to take example responses, and Mesh will look at those example responses, automatically generate a JSON schema from it, and then automatically generate GraphQL from it.
Okay.
So
let's see that. Let's see.
Yes. Okay, so let's install it first. And then while it's installing, what we're going to do is we're going to create the config file that basically tells Mesh what to do. And that config file is very self-explanatory, and it's also, while I'm creating it, like, you would understand what's going on here. So like the standard config file, you can do it in any format you want. It's like very easy to find, but I did it here. Oops. So, but the basic standard is a YAML file. Wait, I didn't rename. It's a YAML file, and that YAML file we're going to describe, like, to Mesh what it needs to do. So, like I described before, Mesh has sources. The first source that we want, let's just name it so it will be easier for us. So that's like the GeoDB, like it's all the DB information that we want. Now, what is the GeoDB? We have a handler. The handler is like what technology we're going to use in order that we need to convert from into GraphQL. So in that case, we want OpenAPI. Yeah, because GeoDB has an OpenAPI. Now we're going to give it two parameters. One is like the source. The source is where we're basically gonna, like, where is the Swagger files? Like, it's the source for not for runtime but for build time. How do I get those things and give something to Mesh to, at build time, generate the code for me? So this is like the link here. The Swagger. This is the Swagger JSON of GeoDB. So there's a whole information here. And, maybe in your company, you have like some Java servers, or maybe you just want to call, like we're doing here, for a third-party API. but they're actually being good citizens and they have a documentation and it's up to date. So so we have it here. So all we need to do is just to feed that into Mesh. And then the second thing is we need to tell Mesh at runtime where to actually send the call. So that's the base URL. And in our case, it's just what they're reading in the documentation. So I'll just paste it here. And that's cool. Now, let's just start with that for a second. Yeah? Like, let's just to demonstrate, one part of Mesh. So we'll do it like gradually. So we installed the stuff. I think everything was installed fine. Now what we want to do is we basically want to, let's say, add like a command. Let's call it like generate SDK. Because what we're going to do now is we're going to generate an SDK that we can just put in our code. We're not going to replace all of our code yet. So we're going to call Mesh generate SDK, which will generate the SDK for us. I'll show later other options. And we want to tell Mesh, okay, the output for this, put it in let's say source SDK generated TS. And yeah, this is like for something later. I'll explain it in a second. Let's just see what's happening now. Yeah, let's try it out. Let's do yarn generate SDK. It's gonna think a bit, yeah, and it's done. Now let's see what happened here. Now we have this file. It's a very long and big file. You don't need to know everything that's going on here. You just need to know that you didn't need to write it. So there's type sweep types here, but there's also for everything that this API is capable of. And there's also actually code, an SDK code that actually does all the calls for you. So that's nice, but at the end of the day, what does it actually mean? So what it means is that like we can now basically let's do like that. Let's import, first of all, let's import Mesh. So let's get Mesh, and also let's do the config. I think it's find and parse config from GraphQL Mesh runtime. So that's what we need in order to actually like start and run Mesh. But we need what we want to do here is we don't want to run Mesh just to, Mesh will become its own server. We just want to use it as an SDK. Okay. Because that also means, by the way, that you can use Mesh like you can use Mesh maybe as a gateway like we have now, but you can also, if you have a, let's say a microservice that is just, let's say, machine learning that needs, it's a microservice and it calls a lot of different stuff, you can still just make it behave like get all the graph of all the different services you want, but just call them as in GraphQL and get it in. You don't, it's like, it's just an SDK. So now what we want to do is we want to just get the SDK that we already got, which is we need to get SDK from the generated thing that we have, which is like, it's in SDK, it's like SDK generated TS. We don't need TS. Okay, cool. Now, what does it actually do? Right, so let's just go, first of all, let's wrap all those things, because what we're gonna do, it's all async. So maybe let's just wrap the whole thing in an async function. So the whole things that we did anyway, like not something new. So let's just wrap this and take, oh, my computer is so slow. And let's just get like all of this and put it here. Okay, so that's nice, and then let's just like start it, right? Like let's just do start. We didn't do anything here. We just now we can call like async stuff inside the stuff. So if we let's just do if in case we have errors, let's just catch them. Well, let's just do something simple like if there's an error, yeah, console error it. Okay. So nothing changes, yeah, but just now let's see like the what we actually get, yeah. So
with async, you're gonna need a wait in some stuff, right? Because the function itself.
So I mean, here we're gonna just call it, and I mean just inside we're gonna start doing await. So that's what I'm gonna try to do now. So let's look at this. So first of all, let's like initialize this thing. So const, let's get the config. Now, if you just do what I did, like you can get the config from anywhere for anywhere you want. But in this case, if you just create a mesh RC YAML, it just knows where it is. So all you need to do is just await and find. I wonder what it's not like just.
Yeah,
I think because my computer is like
computer.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's important for people to understand that because of the equipment, it's a bit slow. But yeah,
it's time for me to like improve to buy a fancy computer like Davey. So yeah, so then what I want is I want to actually let's do like this. Const, let's get the SDK requester. Equals wait, let's get mesh and get the config. Now I want to show like the autocomplete, so that's I hope my computer will actually like work. Yeah. That's SDK. Okay. Now, let's see if that works.
Okay, demo. I mean, the computer is has been slowed down because
it's just my computer is like almost dead here. But what I would have seen, or maybe I can just like go. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just too slow.
Yeah.
So what I would be able to see here, if I would do, and you can follow along later, but SDK dot, I will have all the APIs that I can call there just auto-completed for me, and I can just go in and do everything here. Yeah. So this is fully typed, and I can just basically go and and we'll do it now. We'll just replace those like calls here with a typed call. So I know when I have, instead of get and here just being a string, I will have get cities function. And the get cities functions, I have the types that I need to put in and the types that I need to return. So we close the whole loop. So so let's just do that. I mean, maybe my computer will kind of like be revived until like this thing happens. But so I wanted to show it and then show how cool it is. But so this is one thing. So we declared one API here. So that's cool. But the thing is we have another source. So the other source is the brewery. Yeah. Now the brewery. Imagine now, by the way, that the Geo API like is completely typed and yeah. So now we have the other source, but the other source doesn't have the source of the OpenAPI. It has like we don't know what we're gonna get. So let's just call it Open Brewery. Open Brewery, and then let's define the handler. And the handler in this case, we're gonna use JSON schema. And
so why JSON schema versus but the JSON schema, you have it already from somewhere, or you know it in a way.
That's the thing. I don't know it yet.
Yeah, okay.
So, and in this case, let's say, it's just an API and we really don't know yet. They have no specification. They have maybe some docs, maybe you talked to the developer and they said, yeah, this is how it works. You don't have any programmable interface that you can input to that, which is, a lot of the APIs today, right? Like if you use GraphQL, you kind of got used to it, but in most of the APIs, you just get a URL where, you want to work from, and that's it. So let's just I'll copy the URL. I'll put it here. So that's the API we're gonna call. Now, in OpenAPI, you have operations. What operation do I need to do? So I want to the operation type is query. And now, I want to query fields, and I want to get the breweries, and the path, which is the path from that source, is again breweries. Method, again, it's kind of resting method is get.
So you're just basically going from the base URL and start building kind of the final query.
Yeah, those are the things that I do it manually because I have nothing. If we'll go to their website, I can just read the docs. But in the docs, I can actually find so now I can call it and it will work, but the problem is I won't have types. I just will call it just with Apollo REST data source. We want to do more. So what we thought was, okay, but we have some information, yeah? So in this case, let me find the example that I want to show. Because in the documentation, I'll find just the link here. Yeah, here it is. So in their documentation, they give us some hints. So they say, look, here is an example response that we're gonna get. But maybe that thing, in this case, it's in their this thing came from their documentation. Maybe we just have logs, right? We have live logs, or we can listen. We send a request. It's what we do manually usually. We just call, we get a response, we try to figure out what it is, and write it down. With Mesh, I can just now input this thing. Let me create I can just tell Mesh, look, here is an example input, and here is an example output. What Mesh will do, it will look at that, generate JSON schema from it, and generate GraphQL from it. So let's do that. So I need to just tell Mesh, where is the sample? So we're gonna request sample, and we need to tell it response sample. Now let's just create let's create a file. So let's put it in so let's in Open Brewery, let's create a new file. Let's call it brewery sample. Brewery breweries sample JSON. And in that file, let's just go here, and then let's just paste this thing in. And again, this is how do you do normal JSON?
Just save that. You don't have a parser that.
Just I'll copy this again.
Fantastic.
So that's one sample JSON. Now we want the response. So let's do the same, but for the response. And again, this thing in this case, I'm just copying it here, but let's do I have the history. Okay, let's do brew where is
response.
input sample, let's say. Also JSON, and let's also copy that from their docs.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, didn't pick up everything.
Okay, now that input again can come from basically anywhere, like from your logs or whatever. I'm just, now I'm just doing it manually, but you can do it anywhere. So now I just need to like point it to the right place. So let me just copy that. Okay, now let's see. What I will do now is I will do the same thing. So I'm gonna generate, and now it's gonna generate also the same thing for, well, almost. Operations, or GraphQL Mesh configuration not valid, data source, probably like something here. Let's see. Operations, type fields, methods, sample request, config. Let me just, so we won't waste time, I'll just try it out again. And let's just make sure that the names are okay. Now, by the way, what we're gonna do soon is that we're gonna have a schema for also this YAML file. So we get autocomplete and all of that. We already done it in the CodeGen.
Yeah.
We're gonna do it here. So all of those stuff will be even easier. Okay. Now, something I didn't save, like this maybe. God, it's slow. And let's try that again.
Yeah.
So again, if this will work, yeah, it's done. So now what we look here, and yeah, the idea would be auto-completing everything, but what you can see here now is that I have basically, I have types, but I also have like, let's see, get SDK. I also get functions, and you can see here I have like Brary's query and all of this, and the requester, it's all completely typed. So I wanted to show it with autocomplete, but it's here. Yeah, my computer is dying, but all of those functions now, instead of writing strings and I basically have those things.
Yeah,
so
I mean, you call that the SDK. That's the idea. Like it generates an entire SDK. For
exactly,
you, so
like some companies do it for the database, or things like that you have easily controls. This thing, we can do it for anything. We can do it for the database, but we can do it for anything else.
Yeah.
So let's try to actually like use those things. And I hope maybe it will still be like, it will do the autocomplete because it's really cool. But if not, it's fine. So let's first of all import that. So in that case, we're gonna go to GeoDB resolvers. And again, later on, if we'll have time, we can actually replace all those resolvers. How much time do we have?
Yeah, we almost out of, it's almost over here. It's
really?
Like, yeah,
oh,
we
shit.
still have a good...
okay, so you know what,
minutes,
I'll do, I'll just, let me do really quickly.
Stay with us, people. We should have cool stuff.
Yeah. So I'll just jump to the end.
Cool
like I'm just jumping, and I'll just go commit, and I'll just show how it looks. Yeah. Let's do like this.
So maybe we can show at the beginning how it looks with the code, and then at the end when it's literally with no code, and then we take some time to even do a quick video. Yeah,
and I'll just post like all those steps later, so you can do it yourself. Like it's not magic or anything like that. So now if we look at the code, first of all, oh wait, I need to remove this. Don't say. Okay. Oh, it's slow. So what we do here, what you can see here, we basically remove data sources completely. And instead we have...
before we were extending data sources.
Exactly. And the data sources didn't give us nothing. But here, Let me see if here now it will do like the autocomplete.
It's just pretty
It's just
slow.
so slow.
Yeah,
But anyway, but again, this is, you can see here, it's like completely typed, including like what all the inputs and the outputs. So this result is typed. I know already that this is from the result of find cities using get query. And again, this is from two sources that I have no control of. And if we go to the breweries, it's the same thing. And again, I didn't even have a schema here. So now I'll go to yarn start and and basically I will have the same API, but everything is typed. We typed basically with Cogen, we can type the resolvers, but we also get the SDK here that is completely typed. It's like it's your own code, but it's not even our own code. So we have the types and everything. All the cool stuff that we get from GraphQL, now we have on stuff that are not GraphQL. You know, so now the job is not only easy for the client that consumes GraphQL, it's also easy for the people who write the GraphQL servers. Let's go back here just to make sure like everything still works fine. And call the same thing, and we get the same results. But it's all typed. The cool thing, again, I wish this would like SDK dot. Oh, you see here.
Yeah.
So what you see here is like the REST data source would just didn't help us much.
Yeah.
This is like a super powered REST data source. You know, this is all. It's like a function on my own code, but it's a remote API, and this API specifically doesn't even have a schema. So that's really cool. Now let's move on because we don't have a lot of time. So I'll just jump to the next example. The next example, what we're gonna do, I'm gonna just switch. So I'm switching commits here, yeah. So
just switching.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, so I thought my computer was just dead. Now what I'm gonna show you is basically that's cool, but we want to now. So we wrote code to merge those things. Let me close this and this. Yarn generate. How did we call it? Yarn generate. Yes. Okay, so what? Now let's look at the code. All the sources are gone. Everything, we had resolvers and we had type defs that we wrote ourselves. You remember?
Yeah.
Now it's done. Let's look at how it's gone. Like, how do we do that? We define those here like before. So
okay. Now, what a second there.
Okay.
So you have the index. The index had where you had you were configuring the server, Apollo server.
We had the index, and we had. This is why I'm jumping, but
okay.
So we had the index.
I think this is gonna be confusing for a lot of people, but it's actually really powerful. But
you know what?
We're gonna share the code, right? We're going to share.
I know what I'll do. Let me just go and show the diff. I will be able to show the diff, and we can just walk through the diff. Yeah. This will be easy for people to see. Because that's important. Yeah, and I'll just jump in and I'll show the diffs. Next time we're gonna do a 2-hour workshop, and then and I'm gonna be.
So then I can already ask.
Yeah.
Who wants to?
Okay. Let's start with what we deleted, because it was a lot. Oh, we don't want to show this. Okay, wait, let me refresh. So, what did we change now? So this is the additional, this is what we added. The mesh YAML was actually, as before, like the method was there. We just, instead of now writing GraphQL code that, does the extend that we did first of all in the index, we basically extended the type that comes from one source and added the breweries into it. We took the schema, the schema of the cities, we extended it like we've done before, and we told Mesh, look, here is extra resolvers that you can use. So then we took the code that we had before, if you remember at the beginning that fucked me up, that how to merge those two, and we added it here. Let me show it on the IDE, because if now the IDE is gonna play nice with me, you're gonna see that this thing is typed. So all of the inputs here are typed, and the outputs here are typed. So this is now schema stitching. Because what I'm doing now is, now I'm not running it locally. Like OpenAPI, the Open Brewery API is a remote API. And the populated summary, the cities API also is a remote API. So, but now, so I need to merge those APIs, and this is how I do it. I write those, I extended this, and I told it like, here is the additional resolvers, and I just created that resolver just as before. But now, we took the code that we used to write locally, and we just are now using it to merge two completely separate APIs we have no control of. And we have schema stitching. So that, just by doing that, what we were able to basically do, even look just at the package JSON, we were able to remove Apollo server completely. And the data sources, and we don't need to merge anything, and basically delete the resolvers and the type defs, because they're generated by themselves, and the whole index of how to run everything. So if let's just run it, because what I do now, I can generate that SDK again, but what Mesh can also do is it can become its own server, so its own gateway. So that's what we're gonna, you see here on start, we do mesh serve. Mesh serve is actually starting Mesh as its own server that you can just put, and there's, by the way, there's like a really cool person from the community that took that and took the Mesh config and created like a Docker container. So you can start a Docker container, send that config, and that's it, you have a server. So let's see it in action. So again, if my computer will survive all of this. Okay, so looks like this is working. And now let's go back here. Let's just, let's look at the, I think actually if I'll do this, I think I have a sample query here even, just to go fast. So now, so now sitting using get, by the name of it, I didn't write it. I just got it. And I got it from an API that is not GraphQL at all. So you can see it from the name. It's actually behind the scenes. It's a REST get function, and I got to do all the cool shit from GraphQL. But now breweries is another API that again I can do autocomplete and all of those things. But this is an API that again, without any schema, we were able to stitch it into one API that gives us a whole graph. Now that's powerful. Now let's look at the last step, because I guess we're really, really short in time. So
That's gonna be mind blowing right there.
Yes. So,
so there is a question.
Yeah.
Someone is asking. Fabrice is asking if the two external APIs are updated, right? So how do you update your config? I think you just have to rerun the thing and you generate a new SDK based on the.
Exactly. And the thing is, like, what you saw is that we, for example, for the API that we didn't have a schema for, I just took that source from somewhere, pasted in, and Mesh did it. What you can do is you can start inputting in like some kind of a job. Every time there's a new request coming in, you can put that as the source and then regenerate it. And more than that, what you can do then is once you regenerated it, it becomes GraphQL. Then you can use GraphQL Inspector that will tell you if there was a breaking change or not.
Oh, okay.
Now, we're not doing anything, like you can have the whole power here of what to do. If that API you have no control of, maybe you just want to update Mesh. Maybe you do have control of, and you got this response, and you're like, that's not what it's supposed to be, and it's a team sitting on the other side of the aisle. You're gonna scream at them and say, please fix it. I'm not gonna regenerate my my gateway. Now comes the last part, the no code part. So everything works, everything is great, but what we can actually do, even that resolver code, because it's a pretty standard code. Like we want to extend the schema, and we want to get one source and put it on the other source. So it's relatively something that maybe we could describe in an easier way instead of code. So what Arda actually recently added to Mesh is that instead of additional resolvers, we completely removed it. We completely removed the code, and all we've done was to just declare everything here. So
in your YAML.
In my YAML, without writing any source code. So if I'll go to the actual source that was before, I'm taking the populated places summary. So this is the type that I'm looking at. I want to add a new field, breweries, and what I want what I actually want is the name from there, because what you see here is I get the name. So here I can just say the name is the input, the target is that API, the target method is breweries. Basically everything I described in code, I described here in a config file. So let me just I'll reset the code again. So let's do that. Let's revert this. And let me just check out the end result of the code. And run the whole thing. And what I'll have now is basically just, let me close all the files and show you what I got left with. Is all I have here is the JSONs that is here, that is basically because the source didn't have anything, and the mesh config. And that's it. I have one, basically, if I can have one mesh config file. And now let's run it again and see if it still works.
Okay.
And I have a full-blown.
Okay. I don't know if people who are watching realize what is happening here. Okay. So could we go back into the code for a second?
Yes.
We basically have. Let's close. Let's put it there that we don't. Probably not close it, but
it's trying. It's slowly trying.
Yeah. So
should I go in and?
So no.
Is it enough?
We basically have just that YAML file.
And a package JSON.
And a package JSON.
And that means that now you can take just that YAML file and a package JSON. Even the package JSON you don't need, because the package JSON is just. It's a standard config. It's just those things and a standard command.
Yeah.
So there's someone in the community. I think let me try to quickly find it. GraphQL Mesh Docker. Let's just see what's happening here. Yeah, this is this thing. It's just someone from the community created a Docker file, compose, Kubernetes, where basically what you do, I'll zoom it here. You basically enter your YAML file into a Docker, and now you get a gateway. Now, and so that's why I said mesh sometimes seems confusing to people, because they see just that, which is extremely powerful and extremely great, but how we approached it is that, like, maybe you do want to add customizations, you do want to add code, you do want more control, you want to create your own custom schemas in many, many ways, then you don't have to use mesh as a gateway. You can, but you can also just use mesh as an SDK. And you can just add it to your code and have the full flexibility. It's not like you now are reliant on this like gateway that is central to your things and you don't understand what's going on. You can just use it as an SDK, like just as a better data source instead of Apollo data sources.
Yeah. So. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Do you have questions there, people? We still. I think we're way over time now, but that's super cool.
So in the meantime, until they ask, maybe I'll just like tell them where to go.
Yeah.
So first of all, the example, Arda did it. Also, he's from the guild. So you can go here, but we're also gonna just take this example and we're gonna put it under, you can see here in GraphQL Mesh, we have tons of examples here. Like federation. Oh, one thing that I want to mention here, this is declarative and this uses schema stitching. But let's say you're very excited about federation and the cool Apollo federation. You can just use, instead of declaring this and use the schema stitching way, you can declare federation here. And the merging strategies can be Apollo federation inside mesh. So now you can start using, if you like Apollo federation, you can use Apollo federation without, need to buy into Apollo server and maybe need to, buy the Apollo gateway and the product and everything. You can use federation on an SDK.
Yeah.
And it's completely open source and free. So we have examples of that and all kinds of databases and, migrations. So all the examples here, but also just all those examples. I think if I'm gonna open it in Chrome because maybe that's the idea. We have all those examples running live in the browser. So if you go to GraphQL mesh.com, somewhere here, I don't know where it is. I think it's just lazy loaded. It takes time, but we have like code sandbox inside here, and you can just start playing. You can just start, changing your configuration, calling other things. Basically, all the examples that we have. Where is it again? All the examples that we have here, we also have them live. I don't know why it's not loading now, but
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Very nice. Well, people, we have it. We just click switch here. If you have any questions there, we can still ask them. We share with you on the chat the links, and you can feel free to jump again if you still have some questions. And you want to add something there, just as a closing note?
Thanks for having me here. It was started slow, moved fast, and then ended up really fast.
Really fast,
But thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to sit with you and show you stuff and talk about things.
But I'm not as good as GraphQL. How do you call that?
The generated SDK. Next time, our next feature will be like a generated Davy, so that you can just like.
I take that. So once again, thanks everyone, and don't forget to subscribe. This video here will be rework a little bit, and then we're going to push that online, so you'll be able to rewatch that. Or we can actually do a teach me anything session where I code and you just tell me, and then exactly where I should go, and then we record with my powerful computer, as you said. Like, there's someone on Twitter that says everyone needs that fancy computer. Like, yeah, so
I mean, I'm pretty sure that if you'll do the coding, and it will be so much better. So let's do that.
I see you, Duncan. I see you. I know you're right there. You were watching. So thank you for watching from Dublin. I know you're in Dublin. So thanks everyone to connect, for being here in the community. And next week we're coming with some more TypeScript, React, and reactive programming stuff. So I wish I can actually incorporate a GraphQL session in the coming weeks.
I'm here. I can't even go anywhere.
Yeah, that's actually true. So look, if you want, we had some input last 2 weeks ago about what we could do more for you. So if you have other ideas, please just go on the YouTube channel, subscribe, let us know which kind of topics you want us to bring on the table. And I have one last thing to add is, we as you can see, we've been we had to postpone last week because we're supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, and we're part of that, and we just want to make sure that you understand that this is not something we take lightly. And even if we host the event today, doesn't mean that we don't take that thing lately. We want to make sure that we continue offering what we've been doing, regardless of where we're at in the world, who we are. Especially when you see the way the Hackages is designed, or even the guild, you can understand that that diversity is in us. So I hope you understand that, and you also helping out there. So yeah, I'm out of words. I see you next time, meaning next Thursday, same time, same spot, and we're gonna hack a bit more. So thanks, people. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.